country. We would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands upon which we are meeting, the Kabi Kabi people for me here in Budrum, and the Jawa, Gayabal and Jagera people for Nikki and those of you joining us in Toowoomba. We acknowledge the first storytellers and custodians of these lands and pay respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples past, present and future. Nikki and I are presenting a paper titled The Lasso Way, Reframing Successful Teaching in the Creative Writing Classroom. This paper is a summarised version of a longer paper that we're hoping to present at the AMPS conference in the Inclusive Pedagogy Tract in 2025. It details in part a pilot of our new pedagogical approach to teaching that we trialled in trimester 2 this year, in our third year course, CWR 3002 Advanced Writing Workshop, which forms the basis of the pedagogy we will be implementing across our courses over the next 3 years or so. Nikki is going to provide the context for our work, and I'll detail the implementation and outcomes of the pilot, and then we'll offer some insights into the path ahead for the Lasso Way. So I'll hand over to Nikki.
Thank you. Okay, so we've been teaching creative writing together at UniSQ for just over 10 years, Maria and I, and in that time we've seen an increasing emphasis on using data such as selves, attrition and retention rates and all kinds of other data to measure the quality of our teaching and its success. We've also seen an increase in the bureaucratic quality assurance processes that rely almost wholly on that kind of data to inform policy about course design and delivery. Like you, maybe or maybe not, we've felt frustrated sometimes and disheartened by what we've perceived as an increasingly compliance-driven and top-down approach to teaching. We've found ourselves talking about how we can resist or push back against approaches to learning and teaching that we feel are antithetical to what we perceive as the real value and purpose of our work as teachers and of higher education more broadly, inspiring our students to pursue their writing dreams, empowering them to recognise and build on the skills and talents they come to us with, supporting them as they discover more about the possibilities and challenges involved in pursuing their passions as professions, and supporting them in becoming engaged and ethical citizens of the world of writing. Rather than focusing on statistics that, in our opinion, conceal as much as they reveal about student success, we're concerned with questions about how to create learning spaces that are safe and empowering. As Kasha Wabara asks, how do we truly create safe spaces, not only for writing, but for the bodies and lives of writers? Additionally, how do we encourage and support our students towards becoming the best literary citizens possible, folk who, like us, work towards making the world and the world of writing a more equitable place? This last piece around empowering our students to embrace their role as citizens of the world, of the writing world, is partly inspired by research into Blackfoot Nation influences on Abraham Maslow's work. As part of this project, Dr. Cindy Blackstock, who's a member of the Jiksan tribe, created this diagram. The longer paper, of which this seminar is a summary, dives a lot deeper into this model and its implications. But for the purposes of this short paper, we want to talk about just 3 things. Along with many First Nations communities, Blackfoot peoples believe that we arrive in the world already self-actualised. As Ravilla Chan writes, relating to people as inherently wise involves trusting them and granting them space to express who they are rather than making them the best they can be. Community actualisation is the next step up in this Blackfoot kind of model. Where meeting basic needs, ensuring safety and creating the conditions for expressing purpose is the responsibility of everyone within the community or culture. And third, of course, at the top of the tipi in this model is cultural perpetuity. And cultural perpetuity is the primary aim of the community as a whole, rather than self-actualisation or individual achievement. Our most significant personal responsibility is to meaningfully contribute to the role of sustaining vibrant and healthy cultures. This model of the relationship between individuals and communities aligns beautifully with our ideal of a pedagogy that's not just focused on educating individuals, but on empowering students to become active and engaged citizens of the communities and cultures to which they belong and to which they aspire to belong. How we kept wondering, could we design a pedagogy that identified our students as always already self-realized, as citizens of a community that they bear the responsibility for contributing to and for maintaining. Around the time we're having these conversations, we watched Ted Lasso. I hope you did too. A TV series that focuses on a fictional football team and a coach whose focus is not on winning, but on enhancing the well-being of each member of the team and of the team as a community. Inspired by TED, we decided to reclaim our agency as educators, not by wasting our energy resisting the systems and processes that we find so overwhelming and sometimes antithetical to good teaching, but by focusing on developing a pedagogy that is ethical, aspirational, and community-orientated. A pedagogy whose primary purpose is to support our students' well-being and, indirectly, I guess, the health and well-being of the writing world or community. This leads us to Paulo. In the 1960s, as many of you will know, Paulo Freire developed a pedagogy whose explicit purpose was liberation. Liberation of learners, liberation of educators, and liberation of knowledge. He wrote that those truly committed to liberation must abandon their educational goal of deposit making and replace it with the posing of the problems of human beings in their relation with the world. Problem-posing education, responding to the essence of consciousness, intentionality, rejects communiques and embodies communication. While Freire's argument that learning could and should be liberating resonates deeply with us, his critique of traditional pedagogies also remains depressingly current. Too often in developing course materials and paratext in our context here at USQ, we find ourselves forced to inhabit the roles of experts, engaged in creating knowledge deposits made available to our students through the bank of study desk. We crave instead learning spaces that are capacious, flexible, and inclusive, spaces in which we can engage in critical dialogue with our students, learning from and about them. Such student-led spaces support the creation of diverse and inclusive culture, both within and beyond the classroom. As Felicia Roche-Chavez writes, when you let students lead, when you invite them to talk and you explicitly listen to them, you nurture their critical consciousness. What you're really cultivating is voice, the skill set necessary to speak in, articulating ideas, hopes, and fears, and then to speak out, renouncing inequitable systems at play in students' own lives and in the lives of others. Unfortunately, of course, in formal education settings such as universities, Freire's ideal of attaining knowledge through dialogue is often compromised. Rather than creating emergent curriculums, as Auerbach articulates, where learners identify their own problems and issues and seek solutions in dialogue, we've found that far too often, and especially in online learning spaces, students show up only wanting to withdraw knowledge deposits from the study decks or course bank, or to seek our expert opinions and feedback. We find too that often students within our courses and programs explicitly avoid or devalue dialogic learning. This is sort of a little awkward segue, but we're going to go there. One of the core tools in creative writing pedagogy, is the traditional writer's workshop, where, as Iowa graduate Laura Martin explains, you'd submit a piece of writing and the rest of the workshop would discuss it while you sat silently, quietly, and took notes. Defending your writing, responding to criticism, or speaking out about your choices are all forbidden. The work, we were told, should stand alone. There are many benefits to this workshop model, which we've previously employed in some of our courses at UniSQ, including that students gain an appreciation for and expertise in the process of giving and receiving editorial feedback. In some ways, however, it models the uneven power relations that writers encounter within the writing and publishing industry or community, where editors, publishers, agents, and reviewers assess and respond to our work in ways that actively and sometimes explicitly discourage readers from responding defensively or otherwise. Critiques of the silent writing workshop have proliferated over the last 5 years in particular. Most of the time, these critiques focus on the ways that enforcing the right of silence during discussion of their work exacerbates the silencing and marginalisation of culturally and linguistically diverse peoples. A silencing that we argue extends to queer students, neurodivergent students, differently abled students, and other marginalised learners. As McCrary notes, the proliferation of critical dialogue around silence has generated productive conversations around what silence means in and outside our class communities, who participates in silence, who enforces the silence, and who resists it.
Lovely. Thank you, Nikki. That's a beautiful overview of what we were seeking to achieve with our new pedagogy. So I'm going to take over and explain the implementation of our pedagogy earlier this year. So our TED Lasso pedagogy has several layers of implementation. However, for brevity, I'm mainly going to speak about our community of practice and the unsilenced workshops that sit at the centre of that part of our course. Our first steps in implementing a student-centred, inclusive and collaborative pedagogy in CWR 3002 was a development of a community of practice, which I will refer to as a COP, within which we could return a level of agency to the students through dialogic practices and negotiated assessment. At the same time, we utilised the principles of a COP to de-emphasise teacher-student hierarchies and the attainment of grades as markers of progress or success. Communities of practice, as Wegner and Traynor et al. Explain, are groups of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. Importantly, no one member of a COP is considered the expert. Instead, all members are recognised as having varying skills and knowledge that build a shared understanding and improve the practice of all members. The development of the CWR 3002 COP took place over the first 3 weeks of the trimester. During this stage, the students worked collaboratively to negotiate and then ratify the COP guidelines, which provided a framework for interpersonal interactions, engagement in formative and summative tasks, and for the peer-to-peer feedback processes that students felt would best serve their needs and the needs of their peers. In establishing the COP guidelines, we applied Newman's idea of unsilencing and encouraged the students to be what Freire calls critical co-investigators of their intrinsic motivations for being in the course. One initial challenge with this non-normative positioning was helping our students, who were all third-year creative writing students, see themselves as already experts who had relevant skills and knowledge about creative writing, craft and practice that they could draw upon to teach and to learn from and with each other. The recognition of themselves as already expert was imperative, as it encouraged the students to shift from a withdrawal from the bank model of learning to a collective and inclusive learning model that fostered personal responsibility, choice, cooperation, and critically offered an invitation to be adventurous and risk-embracing. Taking risks and being exploratory are central to the life of a literary citizen, but these qualities are often at odds with the metrics that measure student success in the higher education environment, a schism that most students are acutely aware of. By implementing our student-led COP and unsilencing the planning, reading and writing workshops that occurred in this phase, we created what Cresswell Jaeger calls a system of care that allowed our students to express their diverse interests and needs in ways that help them to feel seen and heard. In turn, the resulting sense of trust and acceptance encouraged our students to be adventurous with their writing practice and to seek their unique writer's voice, which led to a deeper, more reflective understanding of themselves as students, as writers, and as people. The final layer in our system of care was to engage our students individually in conversations across the trimester. These talkback opportunities focused on the students' experiences within the course rather than on traditional measurements of progress, such as grades. In fostering these conversations, we drew from Bloom and Cohen, who argue for the benefits of ungrading, which include encouraging students to take risks and focus on learning rather than achieving. Therefore, in our conversations, we encouraged our students to consider their intrinsic motivations for engaging with creative writing craft and practice, what they had learned about these, and how they might strengthen their learning as they move towards the culmination of their work in the course. Okay, so we have a little bit of a chat about the outcomes of this, of our pilot. So in thinking about the outcomes of our pilot in 3002, we suggest that for the large part, the 3002 COP functioned effectively and was a benefit to the students in exploring and growing their writing craft, in discovering their writer's voice, and in developing their overall confidence. Participation was consistent and generative and always supportive. The students during the various talkback opportunities expressed feelings of inclusion and visibility, which increased their willingness to commit to their learning and engagement. Further, inviting students to invest in developing their COP and its guidelines resulted in demonstrations of congeniality, while also providing them with mechanisms and the respectful language for holding each other accountable in terms of the level of interaction and support expected by the group. The unsilenced model of workshopping implemented in CWR 3002 was for all members of the COP, including the teaching staff, the whole of the trimester. These learner-centred spaces were supportive, affable, open to discussion, and often fun. The workshops provided an inclusive and equitable environment for the students to demonstrate their analytical knowledge and skills, while also opening a safe space where they could confidently share their writing, which became increasingly explorative over the trimester. The growth in the students' willingness to engage, the self-recognised development of their writing skills, and most importantly, in their confidence and courage as writers, is the clearest markers of the success of our inclusive pedagogy. Ultimately, all students passed the course, which is pleasing. However, of more relevance to our goal of creating an inclusive and holistic pedagogy, which aims to develop students beyond a final grade, some students have gone on to submit their writing experiments for publication, with at least one student noting that their growth in confidence from completing CWR 3002 led to this first-time experience in their writing practice. And for us, Nikki and I, it's better than a box of shortbread provided by Ted. Those of you who have watched the show will understand what that reference means. Back to you, Nikki.
Thank you. While our emergent Ted Lasso pedagogy was successfully piloted in 3002, we plan to expand and further develop the pedagogy itself and the strategies and tools that sit within the overarching framework, including through employing some of the strategies and tools that we trialled with these third-year students in our first, and with that we have trialled elsewhere in first and second year offerings. But for now, we want to focus on these three explicit foci that we're looking at as we move forward. So, Maria.
Okay, so our first key focus is on destabilising learning hierarchies. I think it's kind of evident in what we've talked about today. With Bell Hook's teaching philosophy in mind, we want to demonstrate as we move forward with our pedagogy how, when and where we can further destabilise the hierarchies between us and our students so that we can create classrooms which which as Hook states, we are all in power in different ways.
We're also really interested in exploring ungrading. As Greenberg notes, standard grading and assessment practices emerge out of an authoritative and coercive pedagogy and often discourage risk-taking and experimentation. Moving forward, we aim to experiment with ungrading and contract grading, which according to Gibbs relieves stress around achievement for students and encourages intrinsic motivations for learning, promoting communication and encouraging creativity.
And our third focus moving forward will be to further develop our practice of unsilencing writing workshops. While the work we have done in CWR 3002 this year has been very successful, there are nevertheless other equally loud and perhaps even more urgent silences in our courses. Many of our online students, and I'm sure some of you will be aware of this and have this experience in your own courses, are virtual ghosts who choose minimal engagement in their courses. We want to investigate and then implement ways we can make our online learning spaces more inviting and inclusive of these students in ways that don't rely on coercive assessment or course design.
So, in working towards what these more thoughtful forms of pedagogy, as Wilson describes them, our aim is to develop a flexible rather than stiff pedagogy that fully engages the imaginations of the writers in our courses, providing them with rich and valuable learning experiences, and importantly, empowering them in their capacity to become ideal citizens of the writing world and the world more generally. That is us.